Every political party in this House, let's roll on to the 2014 election.
Order. Call Chris Hipkins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, if we needed a clear statement of the lack of enthusiasm and lack of ideas that permeate this national government, we just had it. We just had it from that member. That member who talked about the R&D tax credit. Well, I've got a question for him. Who cut the R&D tax credit? Who was it that removed? Who was it that removed the financial support for firms to invest in R&D? Oh, that would be the current national government. Of course, Nathan Guy argued that by providing the $60 a week for families who have newborn children, we're going to be encouraging people to have a whole lot more babies. A whole lot more babies. It's like saying that because New Zealand's superannuation is universal, more people are going to get old. Well, no, that simply doesn't compute. That simply doesn't compute. Are they arguing for means testing New Zealand's superannuation? If they have a problem, if they've got a problem with providing universal support to New Zealanders, are they going to means test New Zealand's superannuation? Because that's the logical extension of what they've been arguing. That's the logical. Nathan Guy talked about Transmission Gully. After 5 years in government, not one sod has been turned for Transmission Gully. But I'll tell you what, there'll be a sod turned at Otaki at the next general election, Mr Speaker. There'll be a sod turned at Otaki at the next general election. You can mark my words, because Nathan Guy's term in this parliament will be coming to an end. Mr Speaker, I want to talk about the fantastic announcements in the education area that David Cunliffe made in his speech yesterday, extending early childhood education to free early childhood education for 3 and 4 year olds to 25 hours per week. That is something that I know parents all around the country are going to be looking forward to and will welcome. We have said simply extending access is not enough. However, we've also said that we want to increase the quality of early childhood education in New Zealand, and that means that we will reinstate the commitment to having a fully qualified and registered teaching profession in early childhood education. That is something that this government have moved away from. It's interesting that they're willing to talk about quality teaching in schools, which is something that I support, but they're not willing to talk about quality teaching in early childhood education. In fact, they don't see that as a priority. Giving kids the best possible start with their education, and that means investing in quality early childhood education, is one of the most progressive things we can do for the education system. And that's why I'm absolutely proud that Labor's commitment to increasing the number of hours that children can access is being accompanied with an absolute commitment to increasing quality by funding fully qualified teachers in early childhood centres. We also have to recognise that there are some parts of the country where the funding model has been one of the contributing factors to a lack of provision, because the current model that we have has seen most of the growth in early childhood education in the last decade or so come from the for-profit early childhood sector. And that has meant that in many communities, or in a small number of communities, but vitally important areas, there is under-provision because the for-profits don't see a profit-making opportunity in it. And we actually have to get serious about that, and that means that we will put money in. We're unashamedly saying that the Labor government will put money into building new centres where there is under-provision, because under-provision is, and particularly in many poor communities, it is one of the contributing factors to those kids not getting access to early childhood education. And that is the third leg of the stool of Labor's early childhood policy that David Cunliffe announced yesterday, and I'm really, really proud to stand behind that. It's a pretty clear contrast to the things that John Key has been talking about. John Key's 6-page apology for Hekia Parata that he did last week. This, of course, the same Minister of Education who brought us school closures in Christchurch, who thought that increasing the quality of education was going to rest on having bigger class sizes, who brought us Nova Pay. So they're talking about increasing the pay for teachers. There are still teachers around the country who are waiting to be paid at all as a result of that botch-up. Brought us charter schools who don't have to have qualified and registered teachers, who brought us national standards, which of course have been proven to be neither national nor standard, is now saying that they want to focus on the quality of teaching. Well, I thought that was a very interesting argument, because I think that quality teaching is vitally important, but I do want to pick up the comment by Graham Aitken, the Dean of Education at the University of Auckland, who said in an opinion column that there is an Everest of research that shows that socioeconomic status is the strongest predictor of achievement. When the government talk about quality teaching being the strongest predictor of achievement, they're not actually correct. Quality teaching is the strongest in-school predictor of student achievement. There is no argument about that. But it is simply wrong for that government to bury their heads in the sand and claim that all of the things that happen outside the school don't have an impact on kids when they get through the gate. As Graham Aitken has argued, the changes that the government announced last week will have little impact, or limited impact, if they're not accompanied by bold initiatives to address social inequality and poverty. And that is exactly what the Labour Party has done this week with our Best Start program that David Cunliffe announced yesterday. I also want to quote, because I think this is actually really important when considering the package that John Key announced around teaching last week. And that is, he's talking about paying good teachers more. How is this government going to decide what a good teacher is? Because if they're going to decide it based on national standards and NCEA, then they're setting our education system up for failure. Because as Graham Aitken has argued here, top teaching is not about cramming for results on limited measures of learning. It's about leaving students with greater employment of reading, writing and mathematics and feeling confident about new learning in these areas. It is about opening students' minds to the rich curriculum offered in arts, sciences, language, technology, health, physical education and the social sciences. And I say to Jerry Brownlee, I agree with him. My thoughts are very, very similar to his. I think he's absolutely right when he says that we cannot simply narrow the definition of success in our education system into cramming kids to pass a couple of tests in a few areas. We actually have to give them a broad, well-rounded education. And that includes subjects like woodwork. Some kids do quite well in woodwork, probably not the ones who had their educational opportunities completely hamstrung by having the misfortune to have Jerry Brownlee as their woodwork teacher, but many kids do quite well in woodwork, and they do find that as a bridge to other opportunities in education, and kids learn quite well in context. And I actually think then if we're talking about numeracy, that kids doing woodwork quite often actually find woodwork in a very good context in which to learn better numeracy skills. They have to learn skills around measurement and around all sorts of things. It's a good context. But this government don't seem to think that's important. They think that instead you should be cramming kids full of literacy and numeracy alone without the rich context that comes from a broad curriculum, which is what I think we should be focused on in our schools. And that is certainly... What about science, Moana Meki? I hear her saying science, of course, vitally important part of the curriculum as well. No national standards in science, not a priority for this government. Well, I think and all that stuff from Nathan Guy about science, it's a shame that they don't seem to think that science is important in schools. I think employing a chief science advisor to the Prime Minister was a very, very good idea. I think listening to him would be an even better idea, and that is certainly not something that we're seeing from this government. Instead, of course, we have John Key and his dance of the desperate and dateless. It's like political speed dating over there on the National Party benches. We've got Colin Craig, John Banks, Peter Dunn. Peter Dunn now restored to being a Minister of the Crown. I'm really interested to know from John Key and from the National Government who leaked the Kitteridge report. Who leaked the Kitteridge report? Because if they're happy to have Peter Dunn back in the government, the prime suspect for leaking the Kitteridge report, they must think somebody else did it. Because how could John Key sack Peter Dunn last year for leaking a government document and then turn around and reinstate him without actually establishing if it wasn't Peter Dunn, then who was it? Of course, who done it? But we know this has nothing to do with principle. This has everything to do with the desperate clinging to power by this national government, who are out of ideas, who are out of energy, and it's time. And in the coming election, they will be replaced. They will be replaced. And there will be a government with a commitment to ensuring that all New Zealanders share in the economic recovery that is taking place. All New Zealanders get their fair share of that. That's not going to happen under this government, who are committed to the trickle-up theory that sees all of the wealth concentrated in fewer and fewer New Zealanders, while those in the middle get squeezed and those on the lowest incomes get absolutely clobbered. The days of those policies are coming to an end. We have to bring in we have to restore the balance. We have to restore a fair and just society in which every New Zealander is rewarded appropriately for their efforts. Every child in this country gets the best possible start in life. Every school is a great school. Every teacher is a great teacher. This isn't about picking winners. It's about giving everybody their fair opportunities in life.
Speaker.
The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, I move that this debate be now adjourned.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. This debate is interrupted and set down for resumption next sitting day. Call on Government Order of the Day number 1.
Subantarctic Islands Marine